Good morning, everyone. I'm going to welcome you to this meeting of the Task Force on Cannabis-Derived Intoxicants and Illegal Cannabis Production, and also welcome you at 8 a.m. after one holiday. This is really the kickoff of the next chaotic 3 weeks before the next holiday. So we are glad that you are with us. Today may be the last meeting of this group. You will recall that we were convened as a result of legislation passed in 2021, House Bill 3000, and then our mission was further expanded by the passage of Senate Bill 1564 in 2022. We've been at work since about May. I think we've had 6 to 8 meetings, and today we are going to consider a set of recommendations, a report that would be forwarded to the legislature. So thanks to all of you who have participated in all the discussions, either in our task force meetings and in our subcommittees. I think we have a solid body of work to forward for consideration. So let us start with attendance. And Amanda, would you call the attendance, please?
Yes. Representative Marsh.
Present by video.
Representative Morgan.
Present by video. Good morning.
I believe Senator Przansky and Senator Hansel will be a little bit late.
Okay.
Rob Bobette.
Present by video.
Scott Winkles. Sheriff Sickler. I can see you. You might be on mute.
You're on mute. Can you get off mute? Sheriff, we're not hearing you. But the sheriff is here and I see a thumbs up from him. So let's count him as being present and he'll figure out his audio as we go along, I bet.
Sounds good. Courtney Moran. Matt Cyrus. Jay Noller.
Present by telephone.
Thank you. Amanda Metzler.
Present by video.
Brent Kenyon said he's going to be late. Lauren Henderson.
Present by phone.
Andre Urso.
Present by video.
Steve Marks.
Present by video.
Josh Eastman is not going to be able to make it today. Emily Sitton.
Present by video.
Justin Dillon or Jake Johnstone. Amanda Swanson.
Present by video.
And Tyler Bechtel.
Present by video.
All right, and I thought I saw Scott Winkles. Were you able to join?
Yes, I'm on by video.
Thank you. All right, that's attendance, and then I'll keep an eye out when more people are able to join the meeting.
Great, thank you so much. And if we have a chance, maybe we could contact a couple of those people who are missing just to remind them we are here gathered in case they can join us.
It looks like Courtney was just able to join us as well.
Courtney, good morning. We're glad you're here.
Good morning.
Okay, with that, today we are going to talk about our major piece of work here is going to be review the draft report that's been placed in front of us. But we want to start by filling in a couple of big gaps in that report around dollar figures. And the first question that we want to address is what is required for startup funding for a fee-funded product registration system. You all will remember, and Steve Marks can fill in some of the details that we discussed at our last meeting and approved, the notion that hemp products that are destined for human and animal consumption should be subject to a registration system. We also recommended that be administered by the OLCC. So Steve, you're here to tell us a little bit more about how that might be funded, I believe.
Thank you, Chair Marsh. So we looked at cost systems and what we might do in terms of startup. We have both the metric system and our new licensing system that's been put in place by Computronics. We actually think that might be a better option for us going forward, and we think that that would be perhaps cheaper to provide a registry in. We think the cost could be as low as $30,000 to get that programming done as we move the system up. It's under development right now for licensing for marijuana and for alcohol. We think we need a couple of positions within, I think this biennium is what we were thinking for 6 months, a CS3 and an AS2. The total for this biennium would be approximately $122,000 for those 2 positions. And then a 12-month estimated cost continuing those positions in the next biennium of $226,000. At that point, we haven't gone any further, but we'd be close to program initiation. We assume it'd be fee supported for that and the future funding, but we haven't put that together yet or come up with the fees or what it would take on that ongoing basis until design. But we think this would get us started in startup and move us forward. Obviously, we got a little more exploring to do between the 2 systems, but we think this kind of option would get the job done.
Steve, just a couple of clarifications. When you say this biennium, are you talking about 23, 25? Or are you talking about work that would be done in the next 9 months, 8 months?
In the remainder of the current biennium till July 1st, I think, so we could begin to do that. Amanda, correct me if I am wrong.
No, I think you're correct. And I think it would just depend on when it was in place. Obviously, that's when the staffing would begin. We would know.
So is that, how would you propose to fund that within this biennium? Is that an emergency board ask? Is that do you have money stuffed under the cushions you could pull out, or what's the plan?
Great question. So yeah, it may be an emergency board ask. Obviously, we're late. There's December. I think there's a December one. If there's not, there's early January usually. That may be an ask for there if we can't find the funds otherwise that are appropriate to use on this within the budget.
Okay. So at this point, are you intending to explore the emergency board option? And can this group support you in some way in doing that? I think you're right. The next option would be that budget balancing bill that comes out in the very beginning of the session.
Yes, if that's our course. Now, these are probably, I can probably use marijuana dollars that are a little more flexible. And if that's the case,
Steve, I think you've gone on mute. I don't know why, because it doesn't look like you touched anything. Oh, there. Now you may be back now. Say something.
So
Yeah.
So the one I haven't got done over the Thanksgiving holidays is confirm with my budget director how much marijuana funds, whether that be appropriate to spend here. If that's the case, I do not believe we'll need to make an emergency board ask if we think we can appropriately use those funds. So I will need to get back to the group on that, whether we need to go to the emergency board or not. It's one piece I haven't discerned here.
Okay. And then for the biennium to come, the 12-month, that's a 12-month, not a biennium number, the 226, right?
Yes. So then I assume
Yeah, you would be designing a fee-based system that would basically pick up the cost of that, presumably.
Yeah, and we, figure out the remainder of budget authority. We need to do the fee, put it in place, fund whatever maintaining staff would need to be associated with that ongoing system at that point.
Okay, with that, are there questions from the group about how this might work, how the fees are calculated, what it might mean for individual registrants? Do we actually have any idea? Do we have any way to estimate or what how will you make calculations to figure out what an appropriate fee could be? That's a question for you, Steve, that just
Yeah.
off the top of my head.
That's a great question. I was thinking I would get asked that question of what fees should be. I think we'll have to spend some time looking at that. We got time to set that and figure that out yet. So I want to not say it's $50 or $25 or 3,000 per product. I don't know where we want to be at on this. I think it'd be fairly moderate cost because we'd have a lot of products being registered. So I think per product, it would probably be pretty moderate in terms of setting it.
But to be very clear, we definitely want the fees to cover the cost of the program,
Yes.
but not to set the fees such that we are making excessive amounts of money off this program.
And I guess there's one policy question in there for these products. With any of the regulatory program that we're recommending go into place, whether it should support any of that or not. I guess that's a policy question of whether we're just supporting the registration or are we supporting some of the regulation we may be looking to put into place. Probably not. I assume that we'd have separate fees for those that are trying to move products for consumables through. I do think that's a legitimate question about how to set the fees for the registration.
Okay, we'll presume that happens at a future conversation.
Yes.
So are there any questions from this group just about what Steve has outlined, what it will cost to set up this registration system, which is pretty modest, I think. I don't see any hands up. Am I missing anybody? Chair Stickler, if you still fail to get audio, feel free to write any comments in the chat and we'll try and pick them up.
I think I fixed it. Can you hear me now?
Yep, you're good. Excellent. We won't worry
And
about that.
actually, I have the chat disabled for this meeting.
Okay. Well, forget all that. Okay, great. Steve, thank you very much for that report. I think there may be places within our report that we'll need to use that information, so appreciate that help. And now let's go on to the second big question. This is probably an even bigger question. And that is, we're going to call on Rob Ovett. We had a small subgroup. We had first a big, you all will recall, we had a big conversation at the task force as a whole about funding the law enforcement and human trafficking efforts that are involved in this illegal production. And we asked a small subcommittee headed by Rob Ovett to come back to us with some specific recommendations about what that funding should look like. So Rob, what did you decide?
Thank you, Chair Marsh. As you may recall from our last meeting, we had actually made 3 recommendations, but we still have more work to do. So we now have 6 recommendations, which include those 3 previous ones and 3 new ones. And I'll just briefly summarize them all for you to let you know what they're all about. First, just a quick comment. What I call the IMM-EGP, which is the grant program through CJC that funds a lot of what we've talked about. I'll be just referring to IMM-EGP as the grant program, but it actually has 3 separate sources of funding currently. It's kind of cobbled together. So our 6 recommendations kind of flow this way. Cobbling together those 3 disparate sources together with the needs that were unmet from this last grant round. The first recommendation is that the IMM-EGP, I'll just call it basic, be funded at $40 million for the biennium. IMM-EGP Victims Assistance, which is also a current grant that we have out there, be funded at $6 million, which is basically status quo since it's a fairly new program and we quite frankly couldn't tell whether it needed more or less. As a third bucket within IMM-EGP, $5 million for the state police. That is a new recommendation and would be a new bucket within the IMM-EGP. In addition, we're recommending continued funding for OWRD, the Water Resources Department, water masters at current service level, which is 5 million. And then finally, in terms of the economics, $750,000 directly to the Oregon Department of Justice for 2 resource prosecutors to focus on the labor trafficking cases to be of assistance to our district attorneys. So those are the 5 funding pieces. And then we also made a 6th recommendation, which was suggested, I think, wisely by CJC Executive Director Ken Sanchagrin. Because we have all this cobbled together funding, I think Ken and I are going to need to go through that statute and clean it up a bit to make sure these buckets actually work and we don't have cross competition that doesn't make any sense for these various dollars. So I know how to clean that up. It's 3 different temporary statutes, and we can clean that up to make what I've just said kind of fly for the first 3 recommendations, the IMM EGP recommendations. The 2 final ones to OWRD and ODOJ are separate direct allocations. Left unanswered by our subcommittee is where the legislature gets these dollars from. As you know, Madam Chair, some of it has come directly off the top. The original IMM EGP is off the top of cannabis taxes, but then the legislature supplemented it with some general fund dollars. So, I mean, I think optimally all this would come off of cannabis taxes, but I know that's political because I know cannabis taxes fund a lot of things, including some items under Measure 110, for example. So the subcommittee didn't feel like it was our place to make a recommendation as to where the legislature gets the dollars from, although, quite frankly, off the top of cannabis taxes, just as a practical matter, makes more sense, and it's also stabilizing the funding a bit more rather than a 2-year cycle. But those are the recommendations from the funding subcommittee. I think we've completed our work. We found good numbers for now. We'll probably need to reassess those numbers in the springtime to see whether any of them need to get adjusted. But that's my my brief summary.
Thank you, Rob. And just to clarify, my recollection is the off the top number right now is 6 million. Is that, can somebody confirm that?
For which part?
For the
the victims
program, the base program is 6 million from cannabis revenues.
Yeah, that's correct. But then, of course, it was supplemented twice.
Right.
And then the last time with 20 million of general fund. So yeah, you're correct. And so 40 represents kind of a cobbling together of all 3, plus a little bit more to deal with the fact that we at CJC just didn't have enough money to hand out. We had way more grant applications in need than we could fund.
And to further clarify, the state police 5 million is in addition to the 40 million.
Exactly. So we'd have right now the recommendation from the funding subcommittee is the IMM EGP itself, which is 3 of the 5 funding recommendations, would be 40 plus 6 plus 5.
Right. And the cleanup statutes, are you proceeding with those for 2023 then? Is that what you're proposing to do?
Now that came out of the different subcommittees. That was the law enforcement subcommittee, and that's in, I guess, what's been called draft 8B now, which I think legislative council is playing with. And I also put in that separate draft out of the water committee after I worked with OWRD folks to understand, because I didn't understand what I was writing. And then they explained it to me, and then I think we got a cleaner draft into LC for the substantive changes.
Super. Okay. Questions about any of this, about the numbers, where they come from, what our recommendations are? These recommendations would be subsumed in the report from this task force, unless there's any concerns about that. So the lack of hands, I'm going to presume, means that people are comfortable with those funding levels, as well as with the recommendation to not identify a funding source. Good morning, Senator Przansky.
Good morning, all. I apologize. I was in a Senate Conduct Committee meeting and will only be able to be here till 9 o'clock because I have another obligation. Thank you.
And Senator Hansel, thank you for joining.
He was also in the same meeting.
Senator Przansky. And I'm here for the duration.
Great, thank you. We know you're doing multiple duties over there and appreciate your being here. Okay, with that, then I see no further questions, no questions at all, actually, on the funding recommendations. This is, to be clear, a very significant ask. Basically, we are looking at more than $50 million in additional new revenues if you don't count those one-time fundings. The ongoing funding that we have is about $6 million. So if we as we move forward with this, we are all going to need to tell the story very strongly within the legislature about why this money is needed and how it will be spent. And we'll be calling on all of you to help us do that. Okay, with that, then we have more numbers that we can put into the report, and we'll get to the main attraction on today's agenda, which is to review our draft report. And then, assuming that we don't have significant changes or concerns expressed by the committee, to basically confirm the submission of this report to the legislature, because you all will recall that we are required to submit a report by the end of the year on our work together. So Amanda, would you like to walk us through that report, and we'll just take a high level view and see if there are areas that people want to delve into. I don't know if you want to pull it up on the screen. I don't think you have to, but it would be great to just have you walk us through the report organization and the recommendations.
Yep, happy to do so. I'll pull it up here so I can look at it while I'm talking. So I'm hoping everybody had a chance to look at it. I sent it out Wednesday to everybody. Basically, any sort of legislative report, which I'm sure most people are aware of, you have the one executive summary page, which basically will go over what the basis of the report is, and that's sent to all of the legislators. And then you have the full report, which is only sent to the specific committee where you're directed in statute to actually send the report, or anybody else that wants it. So you'll notice in the footer of each page, it has how to get a hard copy basically, and then where to find it on the website. That's why a lot of that's blank right now, because I'll actually have to post the final version on our website before we can link to it. So that would be the last thing that would be filled out in the footer.
Amanda, I'm going to ask you to pause just for a second. I just want to make sure that everybody does have a copy of the report. Did everybody find it in your email? Is there anybody who doesn't have it? Okay, great. Carry on.
Thank you. So the executive summary basically highlights the big bucket items from each of the subgroups, and then also lets the reader know that there is more detailed descriptions of the subgroup recommendations within the full report. So we start with the cannabinoid product registration, just kind of briefly discussing what that is and what the recommendation is. The adult use labeling, which came out of the cannabinoid subcommittee, which basically talks about anything that has like a higher amount of THC in it. We need special labeling so that people know that it's for adults and not children. The recommendation to support the establishment of a state reference lab was also a topic that came up in a couple of the subgroup meetings. Of course, the grant funding for the CJC grants, the expansion of the search warrants, also the water use issues and kind of changing that to a Class A misdemeanor for unlawful use, and then resources to address labor trafficking. And then we go into the first page of the full report, which is just an introduction and a background, really basic on House Bill 3000, what was established in House Bill 3000, and then also the understanding that there was going to be a need for further work. And so the establishment of the task force itself. The next section talks about, sorry, I had to let somebody into the meeting here. All right. The next section talks about Senate Bill 1564 and what it had done to go ahead and add more to what House Bill 3000 had done and add more for the task force to look at. Briefly talks about the membership and what the considerations are. The next section on page 6 is the structure of the task force. So this is where it's discussed about how we have subcommittees, basically talks about a high-level overview of what we did in all the meetings for the most part. And also has a link to the OLCC website where there's audio and agendas of all of our meetings. So anybody who really wanted to go back and look at anything or listen to anything would be able to do it basically through that link. And then we break it up into the specific subcommittees. So, you know, a high level overview of what the law enforcement subcommittee was able to discuss, what was discussed in water and natural resources, and then also in the cannabinoid subcommittee. From there, it goes into the actual recommendations. And so the recommendations were all based on the considerations in House Bill 3000 and Senate Bill 1564. And so we basically just put them into groups, saying what the recommendation is for each of those considerations. And then some, as you notice, will have more recommendations than others. And then you'll also notice there's a couple of places where it's blank with the money sign because that's where the money will get filled in after this meeting. And so it basically just goes through all of the recommendations that we have that we've talked about in our last meeting. And then at the very end, there's 3 recommendations that we really didn't dive deep into for this task force. And those are basically recommendations to consider keep looking at basically as federal law changes and is modified. The short conclusion that basically, you know, just thanks everybody and talks about our work. And then there is one appendix where we went ahead and added the task force membership. So I'm happy to take any questions if anybody has any about the format or anything in the report that anybody might want modified.
I would also invite any of our subcommittee chairs who have specific comments on the substance of the recommendations that came out of their subcommittees to feel free to speak to those. Rob or Senator Przansky, since Senator, you're still here, anything you want to say about the law enforcement recommendations?
I'm just very pleased with all the work that was done by the subcommittee members. I do definitely want to call out Rob Ovett for all of his endurance and all the work that he did. Multiple drafts that he put together for us. Stellar. Thank you very much, Rob, as always.
Rob, any comments about substance? Or are you happy?
No, I'm pretty pleased with I guess what is I mentioned before, draft 8B that Senator Przansky referred to. Look forward to seeing it out of LC and see where it goes.
Great, thank you. Rep. Morgan, do you want to offer any comments about your cannabinoid subcommittee?
I was trying to pull up the draft to make sure the portion's there. No, I know there was different discussion that we haven't really entirely decided on different tracking formats, and just that we need to have a system, that it needs to be this system that essentially that everybody's in the same system, that we don't have a bunch of different things doing different things. But the state lab was an important thing for consistency, for reference, the reference lab. The next steps, I think we'll see after this process goes in place. I think the biggest thing that we're questioning is allowing some things to settle and get in place and then kind of review again. And what is anything needing to be unregulated? Is it too much? Do the systems need to come back a little? Do we have time to allow things to go in place? But no, I think, Amanda, the full report has a good outline of our committee.
Great, thank you. And from the agency's point of view, Lauren or Steve, do you have any comments on the report as a whole or the recommendations that we're putting forward?
I'll hop in. I thought it was great. I do think Senator Morgan's concern about discussion about her subcommittee and the work there. You know, this doesn't clearly delineate, I think, as the discussion we had about consumables in particularly being regulated within one system. We have legislation placeholder related to that to continue to work on that question. I think that's, the registry is one piece. The other parts are another. So that's, and Amanda, correct me if I'm wrong, but I didn't clearly see that recommendation of one system for consumables in there.
No, there wasn't the recommendation for one system because I was under the impression that based on that product registration, that was kind of where it was starting. Based on the last meeting.
Yep. So I just point out, I think a little more clearly what Representative Morgan was in part, at least referencing there. It's really do we have consumables regulated within one system, and that ongoing discussion there with the product registry obviously being a good productive first step, and with the oversight of the products in the market that follow from that.
Lauren, did you have any comment from your perspective?
Yeah, I do. Thank you. In addition to what Steve said, Amanda and Sunny, I think, captured everybody's work very, very well. So thank you to them and all the work that everybody did. The only thing that I looked at it over the weekend, and I haven't looked at the report in total sense, and so I apologize if I didn't get this. But given that this is new, and we have really no idea how many products Steve is going to get registered and those kinds of things, it might be worth a note in the report just to say anything we do around this will probably need to be revisited. It's got to be scalable. We're going to be up and down with numbers. I don't know if that's worth, just so people don't get stuck on numbers. I anticipate there may be a need to go back and fine tune. I think Representative Morgan, you kind of alluded to that in your comment of, do we have this just right? I just throw that out there just for folks, just so that there's a place for the committee or others to go back to and say, well, the committee told us that we might not get it right. I know I've had that before where people say, I thought you said it was going to be this number, and that's particularly true around fees and those kinds of things, given that they're going to be a little bit of a guess, I think, for a bit.
Well, I think we can certainly add language if it's not there with the estimates of what the registration fee will cost that we discussed earlier today that Steve laid out, and with a notation that the intention is to set up a fee structure that covers the costs. And, that may take some adjustments over time. Is that a fair restatement of what you're looking for, Lauren?
Yeah, and any other elements that we have talked about that we may have to go back to. I mean, I've told people that the cannabis work by the legislature is going to be probably ongoing for years, just as we learn what the industry really is and isn't. So it's just that spot when people wonder why we're still talking about cannabis.
Well, we are definitely at a point of time. I don't think we are issuing the definitive report that will get us all off the hook for doing any of this work in the future. But we are, I think, satisfying what we were handed in the two pieces of legislation. Any other comments on the report, the substance of the report, the process? This is a very quiet group today. I guess that's what happens when you meet at 8 o'clock after a holiday. Okay, with that, if there's really no comments, I'm going to presume that means that people are satisfied with the report. We'll make the changes that we've discussed in terms of putting in the right dollar figures and writing some intent language around the registration fees.
Madam Chair?
Yes, who said that?
Senator Przanski.
Yeah.
Do you need a motion to adopt the draft report as amended today?
I think, the rules are a little ambiguous about whether we need to vote on that, but I think it is the right thing to do. So yes, please, I'd welcome your motion.
All right, Madam Chair, I move that we adopt the proposed draft report that has been presented to the task force today with the modifications that have been addressed for filing with the legislature as required by the statute that we're operating under.
Thank you, Senator. So we have a motion on the floor. We don't need a second on that. So is there any discussion of the motion? Rep. Morgan.
Thank you. I just want to clarify, is that including the portions that Rob Ovett and working with Ken are going to be bringing back and incorporating in?
I think what it includes of what we heard from Rob today is all the recommendations regarding the funding. I would expect that we would spell those out.
Okay, just want to make sure. I know that Rob and Ken had, in our subcommittee, we had recommended that they try to clean up the language so it's not kind of counterproductive. And so I just want to make sure that's all included in the
We
process.
can include that as well and note that that is actually happening. So
thank you.
Courtney.
Oh yeah, thank you so much. So I just wanted to make a comment regarding Steve's comment. I don't believe that there was any consensus on a consolidation of end product regulation beyond the product registry. So I just want to make sure that that's not being put in this report.
I think you've stated it correctly, Courtney. I'm not hearing that there was a consensus. I'm hearing some interest from members of the group in continuing that conversation in the future. But at this point, the recommendation focuses on the registration system.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
Anybody disagree with that? Okay, other questions or comments on the motion? Okay, with that, Amanda, will you call a roll? And this is a roll on the motion that was made to accept and forward the report.
Yes. Representative Marsh.
Marsh votes yes.
Representative Morgan.
Yes.
Senator Brzezinski.
Aye. Brzezinski votes
Senator-
yes.
Senator Hansel.
Senator Hansel votes aye.
Rob Ovett.
Rob Ovett votes aye.
Scott Winkles.
Scott Winkles votes aye.
Sheriff Sickler.
Sheriff Sickler votes yes.
Courtney Moran.
Yes, thank you.
Matt Cyrus. I think he was able to join. Jay Noller.
Noller votes aye.
Amanda Metzler.
Metzler votes aye.
Brent Kenyon.
Brent, if you're talking, we can't hear you. I think you're on mute.
There we go. Kenyon votes yes. Sorry about that.
Lauren Henderson.
Henderson votes aye.
Andre Urso.
Urso votes yes.
Steve Marks.
Steve Marks votes yes.
Josh Eastman. Oh, sorry, he's out. And Amanda Swanson.
Swanson votes yes.
And Tyler Bechtel.
Tyler Bechtel votes yes.
Okay, well, that was a clear majority of our group, unanimous vote, I think, which really indicates the collaborative nature of this group and the desire to really come up with recommendations that make sense for this point of time and to move the work forward. So that recommendation will be submitted in the style that Amanda described earlier. The front 2 pages will go to everybody. The full report will go to members of the, I think, House Economic Development, or that committee title has changed a little bit over the last.
It is the former House Economic Development.
Right. So they'll get the full report. We are clearly going to be within our end of the year deadline. We will also be gearing up legislation to advance these recommendations that will be considered in the 2023 session. And as that process goes forward, while today is I think the formal end of this committee and an opportunity to thank all of you for your contributions, we are going to need you when the recommendations come forward in the form of legislation in 2023. So we will be in touch with you. We'll be keeping you updated on the legislation as it's developed, the numbers, where various recommendations are packaged in terms of legislation. So you're not done with this assignment yet. But with that, I just want to pause and thank the staff. Amanda, you've done a terrific job managing us over these past 6 months. Thank you so much for keeping us on track. We also had staff from various agencies on the subcommittees. Appreciate all of their work in helping us move this forward. And I want to thank all of you for participating and giving this from your professional and personal perspectives the very best consideration that we could do. I think we've done a good job, and I think we have a solid set of recommendations to forward.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
This is Senator Przanski again. I also like to take a moment just to thank you for your leadership overall and making certain all 4 of the subgroups were able to meet on time and punctually having our update meetings for the full task force. So thank you for your participation as well.
Thank you, Senator. Glad to work with this group. And with that, then we've done everything that we need to do. I don't anticipate calling all of you back unless something blows up in a way that I don't think we're predicting. But we will be in touch to let you know what legislation looks like, and to enlist you in helping us to further that legislation in 2023. And Amanda or Steve or Lauren, any last comments or things I've forgotten?
I would just say that I'll send, make sure that everybody on the task force has a full copy of the report prior to sending it out to legislators, just so everybody's aware.
Okay.
Other than more thank yous to the chair, to the legislative members and everyone, and no particularly substantive comments, thank you for this work. Really important, I think, to advance, cannabis regulation here in Oregon, get us centered. So I think we did very good work for these recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you.
And this is Lauren, and I agree with everything Steve said. It was a pleasure to be with this group. So
thank you. And thanks to my vice chair, Rep. Morgan, for always being available and being on top of all of this material all the time. Okay.
Except this morning when you call on me. No, thank you, Rep. Marsh. You did a good job, and I appreciate everybody collaborated. I appreciate that.
Yeah. With that, then, I am going to adjourn the meeting. Stay tuned for the report in your email and further requests for your help as we get the session underway. Thank you all.